Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Meeting House, where we have conversation on religion and American life. I'm your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody, coming to you from our studios just outside of Greenville, South Carolina. I urge you to go to our website at themeetinghouse.net and take a look at the book reviews, the commentaries, and the stories that I've published there over the years on this subject, wide-ranging, interviewing atheists and activists, imams and ministers, and like today, scholars of all sorts. I'm glad to welcome back to the Meeting House Dr. Paul Djupe, Associate Professor of Political Science at Denison University in Ohio. He and a couple of colleagues have written a book that is not quite published. It's published, well, he sent it to me in digital form. We'll ask him in a minute when the date is. The title of it, The Full Armor of God, The Mobilization of Christian Nationalism in American Politics. Welcome back to the Meeting House, Paul.
Thanks so much for having me, Dwight. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for engaging in these issues.
What a title to a book.
I can't believe someone hasn't taken it thus far.
Really. The Full Armor of God, of course, a reference to Paul's letter to the Ephesians, where we're to put on the whole armor of God, but it evokes that spiritual warfare language that has become so popular. I'm old enough, I don't know whether you're old enough to remember when all this got started with the culture wars back in 1970 with Jerry Falwell and all of that. That turned all of the dialogue into a war. Isn't that what happened?
That's it. That notion of warfare and sort of cosmic consequences of what's going on. That's been going on for a long time, of course. But you're right to target the 1970s. This is when we start arguing over culture, and of course it expands out from there. So economics and government and you name it. To these days when we're talking about the seven mountains of society that some are trying to take dominion over. But that's perhaps a next installment of this show could talk about that.
You need to write a book. I could talk about this for hours on end as it moves into theology, which is my field. But you've written this book about Christian nationalism. I've done several shows on Christian nationalism. Let's just define it. And to do that, you, of course, draw a whole series of questions. You focus on 6. You actually narrow it down to 1, but you have these 6. I want to go through these 6 questions that you and other scholars use to identify Christian nationalism. Number 1, the federal government should the federal government should declare the United States a Christian nation. What in the world does this mean?
Well, that's great, and we always have to let our respondents sort of define it for themselves. And so this is the trick of trying to figure out what exactly this does mean. It could mean all kinds of things. It could be just the numerical kind of reality that most people in the United States identify as Christian, or it could mean something like the federal government needs to treat Christianity as special, with different privileges than other religious groups might have. So does it go so far as to emphasize sort of the right place of Christianity in the United States, or is it just sort of a numerical reality sort of thing? And this is something that we tried to figure out.
Well, when I first read this, I thought, okay, the president could declare we're a Christian nation. Congress could pass a law. The Supreme Court today, 9-0,
right,
recognizing this right of a Christian postal worker to be off on Sunday. I sat down and made a whole list of questions that came to my mind over this. It's endless, but I don't know what people mean when they say declare the United States a Christian nation, except that for, as you know, sociologists, we're a Christian nation in the same sense that Russia is a Christian nation, that France is a Christian. That is, it's been Christianized and it's the main religion. But I'm not sure what people want who are Christian nationalists, what they are really after in this type of thing.
Well, and that's where we use some of these other questions to help figure out just what's going on. And of course, there's a new project now where we are really explicit about what people might want for, pushing toward, do they really want a theocracy in the United States?
This is a great project you're on. Question 2. The federal government should advocate Christian values.
Right. So again, what does this mean? This could mean something as bland as, love the neighbor as yourself, right? You treat, what you do to the least of these is what you do to me. It could be very inclusive in its notions, or it could be incredibly exclusive. Those Christian values and what they mean by that could just mean for the benefit of Christians. And so one of the things that we did in this book is do an experiment. So half of the people got the question you read, and then half we added the phrase for the benefit of Christians. And here's what's interesting is that the proportion who said that they agree with the statement you read isn't very much higher than the one that I suggested with that additional exclusive component. And so what that tells us is that most people understood the statement you read as something exclusive. They're thinking about when they hear Christian values, that means that benefits us. And it's not something that would benefit all of society.
Even though on something, a moral principle like what you just read would be almost identical to what both Muslims and Jews and many religions and non-religions. I just saw the book this week. Somebody has written, actually I bought it, it's on my shelf. It's about what humanists believe. They would resonate with this as well. It's almost a human value as well as a Christian value, wouldn't you say?
No, I think so. But the crucial thing here is that even though we can read lots of things into the question text about what it might mean, the pattern of responses that we're finding suggests that people understand it as exclusive, that it's really just the federal government should be acting toward the benefit of Christians. Yep.
Here's number 3. The federal government should enforce strict separation of church and state. You note in your book that the expected answer to this is no.
That's right. Yeah. No. So again, the understanding here, right, is that there should be a conflation of the two, that the United States has a special role to play as ordained by God, and therefore Christians need to be in control so they can act out that anointed status.
Yes, and you're already touching on this dominion theology we'll get to in just a minute.
Myself.
I know. The federal government should allow the display of religious symbols in public spaces.
Right, and so this is thinking about having a cross up in a public space. Can you have a crash in a public space during Christmas and this sort of thing? Most people don't get too worked up about this. So even people who don't agree with many of the other statements tend to agree with this one. They're like, that's fine. Symbols are fine. But again, the ones who agree with the others are much more likely to agree with this because they want those symbols, because they want the government to have a visual display of what we the in-group stand for. And
of course, we do this routinely when people take the oath of office, so help me God, or put their hand on a Bible. Or have prayers even in installation services. These are other public symbols in public places in the same thing.
In some ways, of course, those are individuals doing individual things, and so it's a little bit different than having some kind of symbol that's disconnected from the office holder, right? So that's sort of an official statement as opposed to individual preference. But yeah, what you said is right.
Okay, number 5 I found very interesting. The success of the United States is part of God's plan.
Go into this idea that God inspired the United States and the principles that underlie it. You'll find this in his name, David Barton, and his view of American history. that God was there at the founding and was help writing the Constitution. I think nothing could be further from the truth. I don't think there's much academic support for Barton's view of the United States, but there are many that think that there's a clear conflation between what the United States is and should be doing and what God wants.
Lastly, the federal government should allow prayer in public schools. Christian prayer,
Right.
of course.
Oh, well, yeah, and that's something that we played with as well. So the statement is just prayer. And we said, hey, we really need to make this exclusive to Christians. And so we said just Christian prayer. And again, the responses didn't differ very much,
Yeah.
which again tells us this is how people are understanding this as something exclusive, that we Christians are oppressed by the federal government and they need to allow us our expression.
Of course, I'm old enough to remember when we actually did that. I mean, when I started school in public schools, we did that. You know,
Right.
I tried my hand at rewriting these statements.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear what you came up with. And I played with it too today, trying to think about what that might look like.
Because one of the questions that I have, I'm a minister and a theologian, so I have a real vested and emotional investment in all of this. And my question is this: is there a version of religion generally, or of Christianity specifically, that is vibrant enough to push back against this Christian nationalism and offer an alternative to it? Part of my fear, we're going to talk about threat in a minute, but part of my fear is that this Christian nationalism is going to so overtake the religious landscape, and people who don't like it are just going to flee religion altogether, or certainly the churches. Is this feasible?
There's a lot in that question. And so what you said, I think, is there is a vibrant voice. There's a loud voice that opposes Christian nationalism.
Right.
They have sort of national pulpits or
Right.
standpoints. There's Robbie Jones that you've had on this show. There's Kelly Brown Douglas. There's Aubrey Hendricks. There's Jamar Tisby. There's all kinds of folks who have national platforms
Right.
who are engaging this. Right. Baptist Joint Committee is a good example. Are they viable in the sense of having a large enough constituency to be able to push back against Christian nationalism in a way that overwhelms them and prevents them from hijacking the United States? And the answer is maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. I mean, they just certainly don't have large enough congregations. They don't have enough followers who are implementing this on a regular basis. And what you're saying is also true, that lots of folks that have already left congregations, left religion, are some of those who are most interested in combating Christian nationalism because they don't want this to happen to others. So does that give them enough of sort of an army to be able to combat Christian nationalism? And I just don't know that that's the case.
And we here at the Meeting House, a very, very small, minor voice in the whole landscape of religious broadcasting. But as you know, religious broadcasting in general is just almost in lockstep with this Christian nationalism. I know all these people that you've named. Some of them have been here in the Meeting House. We add our voice to them to offer an alternative version of what it means to be a Christian or a religious person and a citizen.
Yep. Let me give you a statistic that is really disappointing, but I think gives us the answer that we want here, and it comes from surveys that I've done of students, and these are college students. They know quite a lot about the world. There's still a bare. Well, now it just tipped to a minority that are religiously identified at Denison, but still, I mean, they're not opposed to religion, and many are identifiers and Christian identifiers. Well, I asked them the question recently about Christians, and a variety of questions about Christians, and one of them was, do Christians want to establish a Christian nation? And the answer was 90% agreement with it, including among the Christian identifiers. The Christian identifiers were no different than those who were non-religious identifiers. So these are folks who lean liberal, who are very worldly, who know a lot, who clearly identify themselves as Christian, as religious, and they think that the plan for Christianity in the United States is to establish a Christian nation. I mean, this just says that we, the large we here, is not reaching people who could be sympathetic to this idea.
And of course, it comes back to what they mean by that phrase, Christian nation. It could mean,
of course,
generically, that we're going to take care of the poor and the marginalized. I mean, if that's what it means, that can be embraced by almost everybody, religion and otherwise.
No, you're exactly right. Yeah, I go back again. I think what everybody understands that to mean is that sort of dominion sense, that it's going to be exclusive to Christians. But you're exactly right. That's a good asterisk to put on this.
Well, in your book, you raise the issue, which I have not encountered before, of threat. And I want to read this. Threat is one of the most powerful forces in politics. The place where respect for rights and alternate ideas break down. It has perhaps become the dominant force in American religion and politics. The book there is quoting you in an article that you wrote. Let's talk about threat. What do they mean by this?
So it means a lot of different possible things, but it really means the promise of future oppression or persecution. Obviously, this is something that resonates with a lot of biblical history and treatment of Christianity over time. And it's something that's come roaring back in especially the last decade. And the reason it's become important in the last decade especially is the Obergefell decision in 2015. So this was a very visible shift for Christians, especially conservative Christians, that suggested they were in the minority. And this is the decision, of course, that legalized same-sex marriage. But there was a real change in the language after that, where they started talking about, especially Christian rights, started talking about religious liberty. Like, we need to be protected from these potential threats that the left government is going to use to take away our religious liberty, our ability to express our views that we're opposed to same-sex marriage. So this threat is the threat of persecution, that they're going to be forced to do things they don't like, that they're not going to be able to practice their religion. And it extends as far as saying things like, we have 20 to 25% of the population that says that Democrats are going to ban the Bible if they get control of the government, which seems just entirely fanciful, until I have a conversation with people at my college reunion where they say, but this happened. But they did ban it in Utah and Texas. And of course, this is about the libraries banning books, sort of things. It has nothing to do with the federal government banning the Bible. But these ideas are being passed around, and some people see evidence of this sort of thing going on.
Yes, and there is some sense in which what is happening now is parallel to the civil rights movement, in which they felt, conservative Christians felt threatened by the intrusive federal government, upending civil society and all the rules and all that. And of course, the particular way in which this has focused in recent days has been on the trans community. I've done several programs on this. I was in a Zoom meeting just prior to this, and we were talking about the federal judge yesterday in conservative Western Kentucky that threw out all of the trans laws that the state legislature had passed this year. Well, to perceive yourself as threatened, your life threatened, your way of life threatened, your values threatened by the government, as you say here, is a very powerful motivating force. What does it justify?
Well, it seems to justify pretty much anything.
Pretty much anything.
The rules seem to go out the window. Respect for others' rights seems to go out the window. And in fact, this is where I kind of get to this phrase, the inverted golden rule.
Talk about it. I thought it was great. I ended my review quoting your inverted golden rule. Talk about it.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. So, it's normally do unto others as they would do unto you. And here, thinking about this notion of threat and future persecution, thinking if those people are going to do something to me, if they're going to take away my rights, I need to do it first. So do unto others before they can do unto you. There's a couple different versions of it, but
I like your version. It is such a great insight. Do unto others before they do unto you. The new golden rule.
I think it is. And, whatever they're about to do, that's justified because, because they're about to do that to you. So nothing is really off the table, it seems, these days in that kind of scenario. And so that's when civil society breaks down. This is when respect for each other starts to break down. This is where we start using freely language like, the other side is demonic and evil. And it's hard to have a civil political conversation when this is how we think about each other and talk about each other.
They're not just a neighbor or a citizen or somebody across the aisle. They become the enemy. They become demonic and diabolical. You point out in your book that when people reach this point in the way they see the other, they have no room for compromise, for a collaboration, for building consensus, and which of course means building community
and democracy.
This is what you point out in your book, and this is where you end up, that this is such a threat to democratic values, democratic processes. And you think
it's an apocalyptic scenario where it's hard to see how we get out of this sort of doom loop of thinking about each other as evil, as if they get in power, they're going to oppress us one way or another. That really makes this whole process a zero-sum game and justifies violating pretty much all the rules to prevent the destruction of your own people. So yeah, we think that this is where civil society breaks down. We think that family relationships break down. We think government relationships break down. It's really a distressing sort of situation.
Sometimes we think of a solution to this kind of internal dissension, an external threat, a threat to the country from outside that would pull us together and face together a threat. But even as I say that, I think about that external threat called COVID, which instead of pulling us together became just another occasion where Christian nationalists blamed the federal government of trying to destroy their religion. So that didn't work, did it?
No, not at all. You're exactly right to nail that down. It was terrible. The American response was seriously hampered as a result, right? Another one that was going on almost at the same time was Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And so, the U.S. used to be pretty firmly allied against Russia and its designs on the world. And of course, we see those kind of splits, right? And there were conservative religious and political folks that were backing Putin and saying this is, the Biden administration's fault for this happening. And it's the same kind of style of talking about it and the same style of dissensus that marks Christian nationalism's place in American politics.
The full armor of God, the mobilization of Christian nationalism in American politics. When is it published and available to purchase? Oh, you've got it. You've got yours.
Yeah, it just came out at so it's available to purchase online, Amazon, wherever.
Good. And what's next on your research and writing? Where is this taking you?
Yeah, well, the next step is exactly kind of where your head is and how we were talking about this, which is to think about, we think that sort of the motive force behind Christian nationalism is apocalypticism. Is part of its a kind of charismatic view, but it's the whole worldview of emphasizing, what we see in Daniel and Revelation that's kind of taken hold of American religion and politics. So working on that project.
I want to talk with you about this again. I'm not going to wait till there's another book out because I agree with you. This is such a front burner issue And because it's so rooted, I think, in the Pentecostal movement, it is not widely appreciated in non-Pentecostal circles. And but anyway,
Although the beliefs, I'll just say the beliefs have extended well beyond that kind of circle. But anyway, I'd love to talk to you about it.
God bless you in your work, Paul. Thank you for being in the meeting house today. We're going to do this again really soon, okay?
Thanks so much, Dwight.
You have a good day.
You too.
I'm Dwight Moody in the meeting house. We've been talking with Paul Djupe. He is the Associate Professor of Political Science at Denison University, a school that I have never visited, but one of my very, very closest friends, a retired American Baptist minister. He and his wife both are graduates of Denison, I guess 1970, something like that. So I've heard about Denison all my life. Paul's been in the meeting house before. We're going to have him back. Thank you for joining our conversation on religion and American life today. Visit our website at themeetinghouse.net. There's lots more information, including the news each week. I have my book review of Paul's book. And I wrote this week my lead column on how the people leaving Christianity are passing by the people that are joining into Christianity. Some are coming and some are going. It's a very interesting road to be on, and watch it happen. Themeetinghouse.net. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dwight Moody, your host. This is The Meeting House. Have a good day.